Bravest of Us All by Marcia Diane Arnold. Pictures by Brad Sneed. When my sister Velma Jean was 10, there was nothing she was afraid of. Well, almost nothing. Of us 7 brothers and sisters, she was the bravest. Velma Jean could walk barefoot across the sandbur patch that lay between the house and the barn, just like she was strolling through a green grass meadow. The rest of us had to put on shoes or beg Velma Jean to carry us piggyback if we wanted to see a new litter of kittens in the hayloft. Velma Jean could swim in the horse tank on the hottest day of summer, even though my older brother, Orville John, swore it was full of biting catfish just waiting to cut our toes off. The rest of us had to stand close and wait for Velma Jean's splashes to cool our sweaty faces. And when dinner was a mite meager, Velma Jean could cross the pasture to the sandhill plum bushes, even when Alfred the bull was in a fearsome mood. The rest of us had to walk up the road and down Mrs. Lecklider's driveway. By the time we got there, we were starving, and Velma Jean had already eaten her fill. When neighbors came to visit, they'd look at Velma Jean breaking a new colt and say, "Why, Velma Jean, you are brave." And Velma Jean said right back, "I'm the bravest of us all." Some days I wished I was the bravest of us all, but I was afraid of most everything. Every time old peddler Jack came to sell his wares, I'd hide under the bed. Velma Jean walked right over to his buggy and said, "How do?" I always ended up with dust balls in my hair, while Velma Jean got a handful of licorice. Mama said, "Don't worry, Ruby Jane. Velma Jean may be the bravest, but you're the best kitchen helper." Somehow, being the best kitchen helper wasn't near as exciting as being the bravest. Still, I didn't mind it none helping Mama. Working in the kitchen with the smell of rye and bread circling around was a nice way to spend afternoons. And if I cooled off in the storm cellar. Mama called it the root cellar, 'cause she used it for storing root vegetables. Jars of beets, potatoes, and carrots. I got to choose the vegetable for supper every night. Daddy called it the cave because it was cool and quiet down there under the earth. In summer, he put boxes of straw on the floor for the hens. I got to collect their eggs every day. On days when the air was heavy with heat, I'd sit with Old Red and the other hens, soaking up the coolness of the earth. Sometimes my little sister, Elsie June, would join me. We'd sort through Mama's old pickle crock, filled with buttons cut from worn-out clothes. We'd hold the prettiest against our aprons, making believin' we were fancy. When Velma Jean walked by, I'd call, "Velma Jean, come get cool." She'd say, "I got work to do above ground. Besides, I got the horse tank to keep me cool." So Velma Jean never came into the storm cellar. I always believed it was because she was busy being the bravest of us all. There was no reason for her to go into the storm cellar anyway. No reason for any of us to, except to collect eggs and choose root vegetables for supper. No storms or tornadoes ever came near our farm. That's because it lay in the bend of Cowskin Creek. And everyone knows tornadoes don't sit down. So no one ever knew Velma Jean's secret until the year Cowskin Creek went dry. The day was hot and sultry. Velma Jean was swimming in the horse tank. The rest of us were standing real close, just waiting for a splash here and there. "Look at that sky," Henry Joe said. "I've never seen it such a funny green color." "It's green as the moss in the horse tank," said Elsie June. "Look at old Alfred," said Marvin James. "He and the cows are as noisy as a fox in the henhouse, stamping their hooves and mooing up a storm." But everything else is so quiet, said Cora Joan. Suddenly, out of the quiet, came a rumbling more frightening than Preacher Watson's Sunday sermon. Out of the southwest, an angry brown cloud pushed down from the light green sky. Just then, Orville John gathered up Elsie June in his arms. This storm's not kiddin', and neither am I. See that hawk circling in front of the clouds? That means a tornado for sure. Everyone to the storm cellar. A flash of lightning skedaddled us toward the house. Rain drenched our faces as we headed for the cellar's wooden door. Daddy held it open, counting us as we stumbled down the steps. 6, he said as I ran past him. He should have said 7 right after, but he didn't. I thought the wind must have snatched his words away. When I turned around, I knew different. There was no 7. There was no Velma Jean. Down the stairs, Ruby Jane, Mama called from below. I looked back at the horse tank. Velma Jean was huddled beside it. She was the bravest of us all, but she looked small and alone. Before Daddy could grab me, I pushed my body against the wind and headed back toward the horse tank. When I got there, I reached out my hand to Velma Jean and scrunched down beside her. Velma Jean, I said, I know you're brave, but there's a tornado brewing, and it's like to swallow you up. If the tornado swallows me up, it'll be into the sky, said Velma Jean. That storm cellar will swallow me into the ground. I'll take my chances with the tornado. When the wind stopped to catch its breath, I looked into Velma Jean's face. Tears welled in her eyes when she mentioned that old storm cellar. That's when I knew her secret. Even the bravest of us all was scared of something. Velma Jean, I said, you can walk barefoot on sandburrs, swim in the horse tank, and stand up to Alfred. There's no need to be afraid of an old... Ruby Jane, she said right back. When I cross the sandbur patch, I just pretend I'm strolling through a green grass meadow. And I know there ain't any biting catfish in the horse tank, 'cause Orville John's the biggest kidder this side of Ravenna. And when I cross the meadow with Alfred in a fearsome mood, well, I can be in just as fearsome a mood when my mouth is watering for those sandhill plums. Besides, I do all those things in the light of day, on top of the earth, where I can see forever. I peeked around the horse tank and saw a brown funnel cloud stirring itself down from the sky. You may know about being brave, Velma Jean, but I know all about that storm cellar. I promise I won't let it swallow you. I stood up, held tight to Velma Jean's hand, and looked that tornado in the face. The wind sounded like old engine 85 coming down the railroad tracks. The funnel grew darker and wider, nearly touching the ground. It was heading straight toward us, howling like a coyote. I was howling too. I'm not going into that cellar without you, Velma Jean. I never knew if Velma Jean gave in because she was afraid of my being blown away, or her being blown away. Maybe it was some of both. Down in the storm cellar, Velma Jean sat close beside me, her face as ash green as the sky before the storm. I knew it was more from the closed-in feeling in the dark corners than the whirling tornado above us. I showed her Mama's pickle crock filled with buttons. I let her hold one of Old Red's eggs warm against her cheek. It seemed to help a little, but after that day Velma Jean never went into the storm cellar again. Course she never had to, 'cause Cowskin Creek never went dry again, and everyone knows tornadoes don't set down in the bend of a creek. Velma Jean still walks barefoot over sandburrs, swims in the new horse tank, and stands up to Alfred the Bull. One thing is different, though. When neighbors come to visit, they look at Velma Jean breaking a new colt and say, "Why, Velma Jean, you are brave." And Velma Jean says right back, "I'm brave, it's true, But let me tell you about the day my little sister Ruby Jane looked a tornado in the face.